We have a question from the audience on the aisle. Sir.
What is the moral responsibility of the U.S. to those people who advocate, care about, are willing to sacrifice themselves, endanger their lives, because they are committed to democracy, and irrespective of everything else, see the U.S. as that bastion of democratic hope?
Let me ask Liz Cheney, if people sign up in one of these countries for the campaign for democracy at America's urging, and then they find themselves on the outs by a new strongman, what's our obligation to those people?
Well, I think it's an excellent question. I think that the record of the United States in 1991 in Iraq, after calling on the Shia in particular to rise up and then not being there to support them, is a shame. Those who argue, for example, that we should leave Iraq today, those who argue that we should pull out of the Middle East today, I have not heard them explain what that would mean for the millions of people who have believed us when we've said that we are standing for freedom, we're standing for a new Middle East. We have a convergence today between what is the right thing to do morally, what is the right thing to do to live up to America's heritage and America's proper role in the world, which is to promote freedom where we can. A convergence between that and America's national security interest, which is that today promoting freedom in the Middle East will make us safer and has made us safer. And I disagree with Shibley. You don't have to choose. When you have a situation where there's a convergence between those two objectives, it seems to me that it's pretty clear that the path you go down is to undertake that policy. On the issue of whether it's made us safer, I would only point out that during the 1990s, when the United States was in fact undertaking the policy that they have advocated, we were attacked in 1993, 1998, 2000. Since 2001, we have not been attacked again. Since we have been promoting democracy in the Middle East, since we have been standing on the side of those for freedom, as messy, as complicated, as difficult as it is, Al-Qaeda has not attacked us here in the U.S. again. It's not only because of that policy, absolutely. It's because of our own policies to take the fight to the enemy. It's because of what we've done to protect the homeland. But surely that policy has been part of it. And you cannot ignore that absence of attacks if you make the argument that we're not safer.
I think Flynt Leverett has something to say about that.
America's moral obligation to the kinds of people that you were describing is, first of all, not to lead such people to believe that we will support them in ways that in the end we will not provide. Our first moral obligation is not to mislead people. Our second moral obligation, particularly in relation to Iraq, is not to go to war when we do not have a coherent and plausible plan for stabilizing a country like that after we have overthrown the regime. To do that, I would argue, is the height of moral irresponsibility.
We have a question from the audience.
I have a question for the side arguing for the proposition. And granted, of course, that the United States sometimes does have to make compromises with dictatorial regimes, and sometimes, in fact, has to wind up being allied with dictatorial regimes, most famously, of course, in the case of World War II. But what I'm wondering is, are there any regimes so reprehensible in the world today or in recent history that the side arguing for the proposition would say that we cannot be allied with them? Would you, for example, say that we should have been allied with the Khmer Rouge as they are running Cambodia and killing some 2 million of their citizens? Is there some point at which we actually should draw the line in terms of regimes that we simply cannot stomach?
Okay. Is there a red line?
I most definitely would not be allied with Khmer Rouge. I most definitely would not be allied with Ahmadinejad, and I most definitely think it was a mistake for us in the past to be semi-allied with Saddam Hussein. But I would have to make one qualifier. That is unless, of course, you are facing an apocalyptic threat. That is why Winston Churchill decided to be allied with Stalin. And if you would look at Churchill's record vis-a-vis communism, he probably was most brutal in being quite honest about what a horrible regime they had in the Soviet Union at that time. But in comparison with Hitler, I am not even sure quite that Churchill was making just a moral judgment. He was making a strategic judgment. He felt that Britain had no choice. And let me say this. I wish foreign policy was a morality play. I wish there was never tension between what we wish and between our security interests. But there is tension. And when we are talking about this tension, we are not suggesting that we do not care about the abused, about those who have no voice. But we are talking about realistic foreign policy choices.
Shibley, Telhami, you had something to add to that?
Well, I agree, first of all, that there are people you don't deal with. But, you know, the choice isn't between having an ally and not. I mean, in most cases, there are governments that are bad that you don't deal with, or you can ignore. There's a difference between applying sanctions or applying some international punishment on a regime and between going to change the system. I think that we're in a great position, and we were after 9/11, to mobilize the international community over issues that were of great importance, not just to us, but to everyone else. And human rights is included in that. And we have international forums, fora in which we can take this. We still are the most powerful nation. And we could have led in international organizations to tighten, to punish, to exclude people who are violating human rights in the international system. I believe that we need to do that. I think it is important to have moral values. I think that national interests cannot explain all of what we do. I don't want to just be serving my material interests. I'm a moral individual. I want my country to stand for moral issues. I don't deny that. What I'm calling for is more modesty, more selectivity, more international organization type action, not the sort of I don't want to say arrogance probably is the word in this particular case, to say that we know what is best and we're going to bring it about. That's not values, especially when the morning after people are far worse, as they are in Iraq, than many of them were the day before.
Danielle Pletka has a response to what you've said.
I have a question. I would like to ask our compatriots whether, had they had the opportunity and were in a position to do so prior to 9/11, would they have worked to overthrow or change the regime in Afghanistan and remove the Taliban?
I'm glad you asked.
Oh, good. Go for it, Dimitri.
I was both writing and talking to people in the administration, including to the Secretary of State, about the need to establish American priorities. And after World Trade Center, after what was done to American embassies in Africa, I felt very strongly that the big target had to be Taliban and, of course, Al-Qaeda. However, the administration at that time was so upset with what was happening in Russia and so eager to reduce increasingly authoritarian Russia down to size that they ignored then Prime Minister Putin, he was not president yet, Prime Minister Putin suggestions that the United States and Russia would work together against Taliban. Similarly, I felt that we, instead of focusing on all kinds of things, including democracy promotion in Pakistan, had to make that very issue, Pakistani support for Taliban, the central issue in our dialogue with that government. We cannot conduct an experiment in history. I do not know whether we attack Taliban with the Russians and with the Pakistanis, whether we would be able to prevent September 11th. Tragically, we would never know.
But you would have supported it, right?
I most definitely.
Like you supported the overthrow of Saddam Hussein.
As a matter of fact.
Right. You did. I know that you did. So I'm just checking.
I did support the overthrow of Saddam Hussein.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
I'm thrilled to hear it.
And I have no regrets.
As did I.
As a point of advancing democracy in Iraq?
That is the big issue. I thought that Saddam Hussein was a threat. I thought that containment was not working. I thought we had to go and try to do it quickly and to turn the project to international organizations.
Natan, Sharansky.
One short note is simply in support of Winston Churchill, because it was mentioned correctly that Winston Churchill had no choice but to cooperate with Stalin to fight Hitler. But immediately after the war, he was the first to declare the beginning of Cold War. He was the first to recognize what is the nature of Soviet Union. And he brought back that moral clarity, which is lacking so much today.